Welcome back to another LinkedIn Live for Well Workplaces. I'm Tom Bosner, your host, and today I've got the absolute pleasure of chatting with the founder of Box Altitude, Rico Rogers. Rico, welcome.
Oh yeah,
Really good, mate. How are you?
good.
All right.
Another sunny lockdown day,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose.
Yes. In lockdown in Melbourne, we are. So we're coming. Rico's sitting in, I believe, in some altitude in your office there. Is that right?
Yeah. So we sort of any opportunity we turn the altitude office on and use that and send out our emails and kind of tick away at some more time at altitude. I also sleep at altitude as well, so it's kind
Oh, I
of
love it. At
yeah.
least
I'm
you're
actually a
you're
believer.
living and breathing your products. I love it. Now, Rico, I guess historically, sleeping and training at altitude has really been um, talked about or known about for elite athletes, and you're an ex-professional cyclist, obviously, as well. So, um, and we know that there's a lot of benefits to it, and I guess it's always seen as something for elite athletes. And what we've been talking about, you and I, for probably on and off for maybe a couple of years, just sort of geeking out together on this is the potential application for altitude settings for, I guess, everyday people, because we know that there's significant lifestyle advantage or upgrades that can be achieved by being exposed to altitude. So I'd love to maybe open this chat up, Rico, with perhaps touching on your background and also just introducing Box Altitude and explaining what that is.
Yeah. So I'll sort of, I suppose, explain the why I came to it and the genesis of it as well.
Mm.
So I sort of I started cycling quite late in life, um, and I think I trained for about 6 months and then moved to Belgium to race, just because I wanted some experiences and sort of a fresh lease on life. And so when I was in Belgium, it was great, and then I had some blood tests done, and then for middle of the season, I went away to the French Alps to do a training camp. And while I was away at the Alps, at the tail end of my training camp, we had some more bloods done, and so the blood results were more or less at Belgium. I was about 39% hematocrit, and then in the Alps, I think I was 44.5 from memory. And so it was just such a significant difference. And then when I went back to racing in Belgium, it was just completely different. You know, you'd look over at the people that you're potentially in a breakaway with, and you just wouldn't understand why they were breathing so hard. And so from that, I was like, oh, well, okay, that works. And in between times, I've always been a bit of a geek. And so I'd
Yeah.
sit down at the end of training. I'd lie back in bed and I'd have plenty of water and read studies about the effects of it and why you do this and why you wouldn't do that. And so I sort of had a fair idea of how that worked. And then when I came back to Melbourne, because I just in Europe, it was just too difficult to get contracts and that sort of thing, and then essentially gave up. And then when I'd given up, I didn't do anything more, and then started to win races here, just quite simply because I spent so much time towards the tail end of the season in Europe in the mountains. And so I think that year I won all up about 25 races, a bit of a mix of
Wow.
here and in Asia. And then from there, I got a contract to ride for an Asian team. When we got the contract, I always wanted to do altitude, and so I had the chance to base myself in Melbourne, but wanted to get the altitude effects. So I bought a sleep system here that was already on the market and started to use that, and got the effects, and then went back to. I did a high altitude race in Asia it was a tour of Qinghai Lake. It starts at 3,200 meters, and
Wow.
off the back of sleeping in this altitude tent, I won a stage there, which is really high level. And I think I got another podium. And so it was obviously it worked, categorically
Yeah.
it just worked. And so I came back and I wanted to spend more time at altitude, but my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife,
Yeah.
she was just not super keen on spending some time, and it was quite a warm sort of tent, and it was loud, and so I sort of figured I could make something better, and so I started to play around with that, and then actually not long later I sort of made the first altitude room at home, and that was a training room, and then I also put the altitude into our bedroom as well, and still use their same tent, and then kept developing. And then after a while, we developed sort of a home system and had to redevelop the entire machine, because what was on the market it wasn't good enough. It wasn't fit for purpose. And so from that point, we sort of needed to have something that could be controlled. And so with that control, we started to develop a Wi-Fi oxygen sensor. And so that would sort of obviously take metrics and shoot it up to the cloud. And then we developed the Wi-Fi altitude generator as well. And so, and the app as well. So you'd be able to set the altitude, stay at a certain altitude, and then turn it off in the morning, which is great,
That's awesome. So from, I guess, experiencing it as a professional cyclist, then to actually assessing what was on the market and trialing it, and then deciding to start making them yourself. How long's Box Altitude now been in operation for as a business at doing this sort of thing? Is it a few years, or how long's the journey up to now?
I think mid 2018 we started this iteration of it. Yeah, and so I think it was mid 2019 that was sort of hitting our strides with the bedroom fit outs, and the bedroom fit outs really came up quite quickly as a really great product, because it was virtually silent into the room. It was, even the first iteration was by far better than anything else that was on the market, and I believe we're still comfortably the best in the market for bedroom fit outs and for pop-up sleep solutions as well. But yeah, I mean, even those early days are fairly similar to what we've got now. It's just that nowadays we've got a very refined protocol so far as setting them up, and then we've got some basic guides for sleeping in it as well. And then I think we're just in the process of redeveloping both the sensor and the app as well, which is really exciting for us. So I suppose it's Gen 2, and the features are going to be, unparalleled.
That's awesome. That's great. Rico, with the actual altitude now, I think for a lot of people, if they're listening to this or watching this now, most of us will be familiar. I'm talking about professional athletes or elite athletes. Most of us will be familiar with altitude training and maybe some of those gyms that have popped up, over the last, say, 5 years, where there's a space that you can go and work out at in altitude. I'm wondering if you can explain just the fundamentals, the science around altitude, maybe just some of the basics around that and how it really works on the body, and the benefits as well, I guess.
Yeah. So training at altitude is quite different from sleeping at it. So training at it, you're looking to, I suppose, increase the amount of oxygen you absorb, and you do this by triggering a response from your body. So I think naturally we absorb about 8% of the oxygen we inhale, whereas when you do intermittent hypoxic training, which is training at altitude, I think you can push it up to between 25 to 30%, and that has a fairly short half-life. So you'll need to do probably 2 45-minute sessions a week, or around about that sort of thing to maintain that sort of increase. And then also there's been some really interesting studies out with doing strength training in the altitude environments as well. And so that can also boost your growth hormone production as well, which is actually really significant. And I still use that. So in this office that we've got at the moment at home, we've got a bike set up that's connected to an online training platform called Zwift. And so I'll do big gear work on that. And so I'll do sort of strength training of maybe five efforts of big gear work, and that'll be a really good response. And I'll do that twice a week as well as sleeping at it. And then with sleeping at it, or let's say spending significant time at it, because it's not limited to just sleeping. You can actually have your office at it, and you could spend, if you're at the office, 40 or 50 hours a week, or maybe if you're an overworker, maybe 60 or 80. You could get the benefits that way as well. And so it's a time-based sort of thing. So I think the first adaptions are around 100 hours in. And actually, if you're sleeping at it, you sort of start to see some sort of changes within the first 35 hours as well, so far as blood markers and blood responses, which is really interesting.
Amazing. And so the benefit, the main benefits are, would it be fair to say that cardiovascular performance improves? What are some of the other things that improve for people if they're being exposed to altitude in an office or sleeping in it, that kind of thing?
So there's lots of really beneficial responses. They go quite, they're so broad, but really there's not many downsides to it. So obviously you can change your blood makeup. So you increase your production of a protein called EPO, which is what all of the dopers typically got caught for in the past. And so let's say if you were sleeping in it, there's a study, I think it was even done by an AFL team, and they spent 19 nights at 2,500 meters, and they had a 5% increase in their hemoglobin mass. And so that translates to about a 4.3% increase in VO2 max. And to put it into super simple terms, what you're trying to do is you're causing a stress at nighttime, and then during the day, that translates to obviously less stress. And then so if you're causing slightly less oxygen in your blood at night, you've got more oxygen during the day where you're actually needing it. It's a fairly simple technique, and it's so safe. I mean, people have been going to the mountains obviously for years and living there for a very long while. And so that's always sort of replicating. And a lot of the studies have sort of been done at the AIS, and on elite athletes, but the benefits for the broader population are really amazing as well. We talk about increasing your cognitive thresholds, the amount of sort of things that you can do or tasks you can do and sit down and perform at. So as well as the physiological adaptation as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. Having not experienced it myself, I'm kind of interested in I'd imagine that there's physical benefits that are obvious, but I'm also interested in if you were to be exposed to it, or let's say I started doing it, the actual feeling that I would get as well, which you were saying there is the cognitive side of that, which would be quite interesting. I'm thinking from let's say it's an everyday person who does exercise and does work out, but also perhaps is a professional perhaps, and they're wanting to perform at a good rate and not feel, I guess, lethargic, those types of things. Would it be fair to say that you would get those benefits as well, where I guess energy levels and stuff improve? Would that be fair, or am I exaggerating it?
No, you'd be exactly right. So I think quite a good example would be, and I know just around the corner from yours is that slight walk up to the top of what's the street there? Let's say you were doing
Collins
that.
Street.
Yeah, and so
Yep.
you had some colleagues next to you within, and you were chatting away as you're walking up the hill. Normally you might get a little bit of a puff on. Maybe you might miss a couple of words because you're breathing a little bit, whereas this will just sort of increase your amount that you can absorb. So you are probably inhaling about the same amount, but you're absorbing a hell of a lot more. So you won't be out of breath. And towards the top of the hill, you might find that your work colleagues, you'll notice that they're puffing a little bit more than what you would, which is obviously quite good from a athlete's point of view. It's almost essential, but from an everyday sort of people, I think that's really great. And I suppose it's also recovery as well. If you find that you can walk to the top of that hill without panting or puffing, it'll be that much easier to either repeat it or recover from it. So the next day it'd be that much easier, or towards the tail end of the day when you're typically a bit tired, or you're looking for that coffee or energy drink or whatever you do, you probably won't need it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, a lot of people do spend everyday punters. I mean, they are doing the right things. They may be going to the gym to do workouts for, 4 times a week, but then I guess in amongst their general lifestyle, sometimes sleep is the one that they cut into because they're busy with work, maybe trying to fit in the fitness, looking after the kids, etc. So it seems like this could have some benefit for people, everyday people. And I know it's been applied to athletes and it's kind of been well researched and documented. But it seems like, going forward into the future, that this technology that you've really sort of developed has some interesting future applications. Rico, I'm wondering, with the data, we were talking a couple of weeks ago, I think, about the data that people have on their, watches and smart devices. There's so many, I guess, data points that we collect. I don't feel like we're linking it through to that analysis into, I guess, focusing on certain things and really improving our performance that way. I'm wondering if you could share some light on what are some of the data points that maybe, if you've got an Apple Watch or something, what's a good data point to focus on or to watch, or maybe it has applications in with the technology that you have?
So, yeah, so I'm a geek for this stuff because
I know.
why wouldn't you? Like the wearables that we've got on our hands at the moment are really amazing, and are so, I suppose, underseen or understood perhaps. So what I would look for typically is my heart rate variability. So that's the beat to beat measurements that your watch potentially is doing. So what you want is a high, the higher the better, So I think if you're fatigued, and I was fatigued yesterday because I'd done a ride around Albert Park, and I think my heart rate variability went down to 30. And so the ways that you can bring that up is sort of to have mindfulness breaks. And so I actually used yesterday this Apple breathing app, and that seems to bring it up quite efficiently as well. And so it's the same with stress as well. If you're very stressed at work, and I suspect that the broader population at the moment is very stressed, having been locked down for so long. And so if they had worn their Apple Watch for the last year or so, they might see that during lockdowns, your heart rate variability sort of takes a dip, and then maybe afterwards it might increase, which is no surprise. And so if you can sort of track and understand why that's doing that, and then perhaps make changes or alterations in your behavior to enable you to stay at that high level, you'll have a higher quality of life. And so the other thing that's been a big change in the last wee while, certainly from our point of view, is blood oxygen content on your watch. So although I don't believe that's overly accurate on the watches at the moment, I think that it'll only get better. And for us, it's great because at nighttime, obviously, with our systems, you can see a slight dip, and then during the day, you can see it increase as well. And so we also notice with our systems is that during the day, your heart rate will drop over time. Let's say the first 2 to 4 weeks of sleeping in an altitude environment, your lowest heart rate point during the day and your average heart rate will be consistently lower. So it means that the blood that's getting transported around your body is obviously taking more oxygen, or you're absorbing oxygen more efficiently, which is really great because it just means that you've got less cardiovascular stress, you know.
Yep, that makes sense. So the heart rate variability was the first one you mentioned. The second one was the is that SpO2? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's now on Apple Watches, isn't it? That whereas I think maybe the old ones they didn't have it. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's on Garmin watches, on Apple watches, and then there's also Fitbit also have it as well. So they're obviously the three main players, and I think that Apple watches are about to come out with blood glucose measurement as well.
Yep.
Which I think is really interesting. I think that they're probably collecting a hell of a lot of data, and they can make some pretty amazing assumptions off the back of it, whether people know how to interpret it or whether there's another industry that stems from this that says, come and have a consultation with us and let's have a talk about what you're actually doing and how we can change your way of life to be better suited to you.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's quite interesting, isn't it, with those bigger technology like Garmin, Apple. I mean, the amount of data points they'd be collecting. Obviously, the gold in this, which is how do you collect all that, interpret it, and then make a change that ultimately leads to a longer lifestyle that's is full of vitality and health and well-being. It's quite interesting. Do you feel like probably in the next, say, 5 years that things will come together with people, and even I'm thinking from a health professional or practitioner perspective, that there'll be more data to interpret, or maybe a simplification of this data to then create initiatives that can be measured? Is that how you're seeing it in the next, say, 5 years, changing rapidly? Or
I think so. I think companies like yours will probably adopt the tech fairly comfortably, and you'll be able to have measurable changes in people's lifestyles. It'll be pre and post consultation, I suspect. And I think that management in these bigger organizations will probably be able to, or it'll come from them, I suspect, because everyone will know exactly where their stress levels are coming from. I mean, it could well be from home as well, like if you've got a newborn baby or a kid that's getting up at 3 a.m. every day, it's going to be pretty obvious that you're not sleeping as efficiently as you could. And I think that even with our systems, we find that a lot of the conversations we have is around good sleep hygiene, because I think that now with the onset of these devices, you can actually say, I don't sleep well, or you can see it fairly clearly from these wearables, which is amazing, because now you can actually change your patterns if you look at the data.
Yeah, exactly right. And I guess where we started with that was that most people don't know what to look for, and hopefully those couple of points that you've mentioned there, the heart rate variability and the SpO2, people can at least maybe from this have a look at it and just see perhaps the last few months of, if they can find it in their phones or their watches, and just have a look at the last few months and just see what's happening, especially with the lockdown stress, as you say, Rico. The real big one's going to be, though, I'm also, again, I'm talking from a health professional's perspective, is when there's got to be a transition when people start to really get it, and then they create interventions that they can really measure on and try and measure over a good period of time. So, if we know that, say, from a health and fitness perspective, that where you need 6 weeks to improve, let's say you can do a hypertrophy training block and you need about 6 weeks to do that. that's currently being done, but the measurements might not be as accurate as, say, if you're using some techs that's a little bit more accurate. So I think there's going to be some improvements in overall healthcare delivery, and also in GP, just GPs in general, doctors. There's only going to be more accuracy and, I guess, diagnostics and individualization, if that's a word, of healthcare, because at the moment, in some of healthcare in general, some of it is, you've got this diagnosis, so here's something that we try on all individuals with this. I feel like the tech side with the data makes things a bit more specific to the individual, which is important. Rico, I'm wondering now, if we're going back to the altitude, or sleeping at altitude, and also box altitude in particular, you're probably having interesting conversations, I'd imagine, around how can this technology be used now, but also in the future in various settings. I'd love if you could maybe expand on that. Do you have anything to share on, say, the future application of your technology in maybe homes and hotels, that kind of thing? Do you have any stories there to share?
Yeah, I think it's, what we're doing or focusing on at this point in time is sports teams. So we're obviously, that's our first port of call. But then again, we are getting a lot of interest within wellness centers and wellness hotels, quite simply because, for a hotel, it's a bit of a new thing. And I have heard of hotels that are adopting air filtration, which is great. It's very hard to measure any increase in health with just that. Whereas what we are, I suppose, pioneering with is a measurable change in your health and wellness. So for hotels, I believe it's going to be an added bonus in the future. But obviously it'll take its time to get there. But we're obviously motivated for that side of it, and to be able to have metrics that we can actually, I suppose, show people straight away and sort of have them look at it from a snapshot point of view is going to be very, very important as well. But even also with awareness, I think that obviously that's really important, but also paired with actual benefits, because from our point of view, there's no point in having something that is all fluff. We actually need to have measurable changes in people's lifestyle. And so that's sort of, for us to really, I suppose, make a dent or make an impact with it, we need to be able to, I suppose, translate that into real time or, measurable changes in people's health and well-being.
Yep. So from, going, say, 5 years ahead from, say, sporting teams, you picture this technology being adopted in homes and hotels, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean,
well? Yep.
Yeah, homes, absolutely. I believe homes is a bit of a no-brainer. So we've called it a sleep cloud system. So it looks like a 4-poster bed tent. And so what we've tried to do is to bring all of the positives from the bedroom systems into those. And so those are really quite comfortable. They're really great as an entry-level sort of system. And then from there, we see a lot of people graduating to a complete room system. And actually, it's been interesting in the last sort of, I suppose, 8 to 12 weeks. We've had interest from not just athletes, but everyday people that have sort of, I suppose, done the research and sort of come up with the idea that it is beneficial, which is really great. And so we can sort of forward them some studies and say, because I don't really want to just put out literature and just have people read it and then make a decision. It's far better if actually people do their own research and then come back to us and perhaps ask a couple of questions and then go away and do more of their own research. And I think that's probably very powerful as well. We find that the majority of people that are buying our systems are well educated in it, and so we have a lot of doctors and and that sort of thing that are purchasing our systems, because obviously it just stacks up, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, everyday people now, I know as more technology comes out, people are looking to get the performance edge in various ways. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's maybe short term marketed really well, but doesn't actually stack up with the science and the reality of the changes that you can achieve from it. I'm thinking, you can think of all the fads that we've seen over the last, say, 5-10 years in health and well-being. So I like your approach, which is really ensuring that people understand the science and the evidence around this. I can immediately think of a few clients that I used to see as a physio that would actually love to connect and maybe have a bit of a better look at the research with what you've got. Rico, with your clients, so you've obviously got quite a few clients now, and you mentioned that they're in their professional teams. Are there any people that you or any recent, I guess, successes with those clients that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So we sponsor the world's best cycling team, and so I think, yeah, I mean, there's quite a long list. I think that there was an Olympic champion time trialist, Primoz Roglic. So that's fairly recent. I suppose multiple stages of the tour with both the teams that we sponsor, which is really great. And then there's quite a few clients that just purchase, and we walk through protocols and how it could work best for them. And they're absolutely, we can't really mention them because they just pay retail. But they're former Olympic champions and all very top tier athletes. And then we've got sort of elite amateurs as well. And so we've got people that are winning in the master sort of categories of all sorts of fields. And it's very broad, but we keep getting people emailing saying, well, I've hit my personal best, and we kind of get that email fairly regularly as well.
Beautiful. How good's that? Well, that's great. So you get some, I know there's a lot of client successes for you, and I know that slowly over time people are going to catch on to this. So it's very nice to have you on the Well Workplaces LinkedIn Live here, just to share your story and what Box Altitude's about, but also just about how altitude works. Because I think for a lot of people, it might be something that they just have no idea how it works. So they might think they might not understand it completely. So yeah, really cool to share some of the science and some of your insights, Rico. We'll finish there. Take care, and thanks so much, mate.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, guys, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. So
yeah, cheers, mate. Thank you.